What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are starting a new series where we look at every NFL team. We look at their depth chart. We look at their 2023 season. We look at them from all aspects, what they added in the draft. We have fantasy projections on deck for you and schedule predictions as well. So this is a full-fledged Arizona Cardinals preview today. We're going to get into the Cardinals, and we're just going to start right off 2023 recap. So 4-13. 7 one-score games, and they were a record of 2-5 in those games, so they were competitive. I think that's an important piece. Kyler Murray came back and performed pretty well. I think better than many anticipated in the new offense, but maybe not as well as we had seen from Kyler before. Trey McBride had a breakout year, but their defense was the second worst in the NFL. Randy, what were your takeaways from the Cardinals last year?
Yeah, I mean, Kyler missed half the year. We kind of knew they weren't going to do anything. I think for most people, they won more games than we imagined, and they still got arguably the best player of the draft. So, you got a little bit more confidence in Kyler in the offense, a couple more wins than you were hoping for, a little bit of a breakout of Josh Dobbs there. Really weird year for the Cardinals, and almost we're just throwing the can, we're eating some money issues, and we're figuring it out starting next year.
Yeah, and we mentioned the defense. We'll talk about what they added on the defensive side of the ball, but they certainly poured a lot of resources in to try to make this a more competitive group because I think their offense was shockingly good at times last year. There were times where the Cardinals' offense with Clayton Tune at quarterback early in the year looked pretty good at times. So there was a lot to build on. I really like what Drew Petzing did for them. Still got to build on it. They've added some talent, and let's talk about what they added. So the big moves, free agency, Justin Jones, Jonah Williams, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Bilal Nichols, Zay Jones, Evan Brown, Mac Wilson, and then the draft. Marvin Harrison Jr. was the cream of the crop there. Darius Robinson as well. Max Melton, Trey Benson, Isaiah Adams. So they really they kind of had a balanced attack on the draft side of things, where they did get a wide receiver. They went and got 2 skill positions. But really, they just invested heavy into this defense.
Yeah, again, like you said, second worst defense. That was a very clear issue. You had some sparks from the offense last year. You need to give them big weapons to help them grow and help the young weapons you had last year grow as well, improve the offensive line slightly, just to really plug in some holes and see if you could make it work for the future. But the heavy invest in the defense was very smart. The defensive line was really bad. You have some upside edge rushers, so you added to that room slightly, but you really added to your backbone of this defense and then drafted another threat and 2 good corners, in my opinion, on day 2 to really bolster this defense. And to, if you can make it average this year with a young core, you did your job.
Yeah. And when you look at what they lost, just not a whole lot. DJ Humphries has been up and down, and we were definitely on a downswing. Jeff Swaim is like their most impactful player that they lost on offense. And then Carlos Watkins, Rashad Fenton, Josh Woods. I think most people, Cardinals fans, I'm sure all of these guys, but most like casual NFL fans don't know those last 3 names. So that's a good sign when you haven't lost a whole lot of impactful players. Hollywood Brown should be on that list as well.
Yeah.
But my thing was that I think they were always losing Hollywood Brown. They kind of knew that. And so this wide receiver room, they were starting to build towards that. And that's why, they added Zay Jones as a nice like hedge of your bet on Michael Wilson. But I still like Michael Wilson. So let's get into the depth chart on that note, because right now we talked pre-show. I still think that this offensive line, it's got promise, but there is certainly some room for improvement from that group. They signed Evan Brown. They drafted a couple of guards, like we mentioned. They signed Jonah Williams, but like when you stack this lineup, offensive line up against the rest of the NFL, you're still looking at probably a bottom third group. Is that where you'd put them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Paris Johnson, we're not 100% sure where their tackles are going to set Jonah Williams and Paris Johnson, but if Paris Johnson continues to grow, Jonah Williams has shown some flashes of being actually a really good quality starter. If he can continue that, Will Hernandez was really good for you, but you improved this offensive line from last year, even if it's just slightly. But yeah, it's still a bottom third, maybe with Paris Johnson elevating his game, we get to average of the
Mhm.
NFL. But you did a good stepping stone. You built everywhere else. You built on the defense. You gave yourself more weapons, and then you added some depth pieces. It's a good start. I think they still have to attack interior offensive line next year, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. And then the wide receiver room, we just mentioned that, but right now, some of these depth charts are probably a little wrong. I think Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch probably both start together. I think the battle would be maybe with Michael Wilson and Zay Jones. But some places have the three starters as Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, and Zay Jones. So wherever you look, I don't actually think that this will be the case, but I do think there's a clear four-person rotation in this wide receiver room. This is an offense that will use a lot of 12 personnel. So it was important that they got someone like Tip Ryman that can go out there and be that blocking tight end so that Trey McBride can move around and be a weapon on the receiving end of things like he was throughout most of last year. Um, we'll get into the fantasy rankings and projections, Randy, but do you think Trey McBride takes a massive hit with Marvin Harrison Jr. coming in?
From the style of gameplay we saw last year, yeah, but that's only because Hollywood was hurt. Mike Wilson was slowly breaking out and got banged up. Same with Dortch. It just really didn't work out to where McBride was really the only weapon there for the longest time besides James Conner. So, yeah, he's going to take like a target share hit, but I don't think that necessarily is going to get close with production just because there should be an upgrade to touchdown production of this offense. He's not going to have as much of tight coverage or any double coverage really because Marvin Harrison is getting all of that. And
Mhm.
then Zay Jones is a good deep threat. You have to take coverage on that side as well to help out. McBride should have some open zones this year, and I think maybe it's not as consistent as last year where he's getting double-digit targets a game, but I think the production can be at least close, if not the same.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get into it, but I think the efficiency is gonna go way up. I think the targets will go down, but there's also I mean, when you look at the rest of this this group, like, you can argue that the running backs will garner some targets. I think Trey Benson is certainly a good addition. They can use him in the passing attack, and I have it projected that way. James Conner is still gonna be a factor in this offense, but when you look at outside of that, like, Michael Wilson and Zay Jones are good NFL players, but they're not inspiring from a let's feed these guys targets type of mindset. So to me, I think Harrison and McBride are still gonna be the clear leaders in target share when we get down to it. Kyler Murray taking a step forward back to kind of what we used to see with Cliff Kingsbury.
Uh, I hope not. To what we saw with
Yeah,
Kingsbury, because we really didn't like that offense.
hated
Um,
it. Gross.
I do think he's obviously going to be quarterback two this year at worst. Dynasty wise, I think this is a great sign for him. I think this easily sets him back in as a dynasty quarterback one. But we do really need to see a full offseason and a full season of Kyler in this offense with this coaching staff. See if they can improve. So we know the coaching staff's going to stick around. And there's a lot still to be left to prove here. And they still really have to add continually to these weapons for him to continue to succeed. I'm curious with the injury history at this point, how much he's going to keep running. And obviously, it's going to be part of his game, but it was a crucial part of his game early in his career. Let's see if he can get back to throwing the ball a little bit more. So a little bit less on the legs. Now you have two running backs. Are we going to run the ball a little bit more with the two tight end set now? We'll see. I think it's going to be a little bit of a plus minus for Kyler this year.
Yeah. One interesting thing is while I do like this offense a lot, and we saw some really good flashes, I don't necessarily think it fits Kyler's style. So it's certainly
The
an
running
adjustment.
style, no.
Right. Well, and even some of the passing concepts are just so foreign to what Kyler has done in the past. Like, I think he can do it, but it's just Cliff Kingsbury didn't know how to run an NFL offense, to be completely honest. So we really haven't seen a ton of like really high level quarterbacking from Kyler Murray outside of a deep ball and feeding one guy targets, which I think we can say he'll be feeding one guy targets. Let's flip over to the defensive side though, because we mentioned it, but this defensive line group is really quite good. I mean, they really improved both sides of the trench. But Justin Jones was a quality player. I'm wearing a Bears thing. I watched a lot of Bears games last year. Justin Jones was up and down. There were times where he was really productive and then he couldn't finish. But to me, you've got guys on that second level now that can kind of clean up. So as long as Justin Jones can kind of wreck up front, I think they're in good shape. Bilal Nichols is a good piece. You've got Darius Robinson rotating in. Like Zayvon Collins showed promise as a full time edge rusher. I loved BJ Ojolari. I don't remember what your grade was on him that year, but I
Where he
was
got
super high.
drafted, because he
Yeah,
he was projected first round. I had him in second. You had him first, late first,
yeah,
and
yeah,
he went early second. So cool with me.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, makes sense. But they added Xavier Thomas as well. To me, this team on the front end of this defense, they're good. The problem, I think, that second level, I said they have some guys that can clean up, but there's certainly going to be some inconsistencies. Mac Wilson has been up and down throughout the years. I think there's a lot of promise in some of those like depth guys there. I think Chris Barnes has some good moments on film, but I don't think he's anything to write home about. I'm really worried about the corners still. I know they signed Sean Murphy Bunting, they drafted Max Melton, but you're really relying on an iffy group to kind of carry you. And the secondary has been a problem for Arizona for a while now.
Yeah, but it kind of last year, at least, and I think it's going to be this year as well. Was reminded me of Indianapolis's defense in this last year, where you had a bunch of young
Mhm,
guys that stepped up, made flashes, inconsistent, but everyone had good flashes, but no one was consistent. And I think we had some of that last year with Starling Thomas, Garrett Williams, but I think we're going to have a lot more of that this year. And Melton, I think, he'll be consistent enough to win a starting outside job.
mhm,
Garrett Williams can then stay on the inside where he really should be. And Starling Thomas can actually rotate in with Murphy Bunting and actually get improved to where he needed to be, because really he could be in the slot as well. I do think with this linebacking core, they might be throwing more of these secondary players on the field as well. So that's going to be really needed. And hopefully Buda Baker is happy again and he can really light a fire under the rest of the secondary to help them develop. And if they can just, even if they're not great in coverage, if they can just be making plays with
mhm.
this backbone of the defense, that's what you want from this team.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Now that we talked through the team, sorry for the long snappers and punters and whatnot, but we're gonna get into the schedule. So, Randy, what was their over underline
Yeah,
for the?
currently 6.5, at least when we were putting the show back together, obviously
Yeah.
6.5, with people leaning on the over, and then plus 290 to make the playoffs, plus 1200 to win the division, last in the division, obviously, and plus
Mhm.
8,000 to win the Super Bowl. And they're only favored to win 5 out of 17 games currently. So
Interesting.
nothing great. But again, 4-13 last year, you're over under 6.5. That's showing that you made positive improvements to this team.
Yeah, it's interesting that they're over under 6.5, and they're only favored in 5 of those games. Normally,
There's
that's one
there's a
away.
couple there's a couple like coin toss games.
Fair, fair. So they do have a really rough first three. I think home against the Rams is their best bet in week 2 to get a win. Randy, what was your prediction? So we go through. We're going to do scheduled predictions for every team. So we have this all slated out so that we're not saying, "Oh, Cardinals are going to win week 1," and then we get to the Bills and say that the Bills are going to win week 1. So Randy, what was your prediction for the Cardinals?
Yeah, I have them 7-10, just hitting the over, winning the obvious games a bit in Washington, New England, Carolina, Chargers a little bit of a toss up, Jets was a little bit of a toss up slash shocker, and then I have them beating the Rams in week 2. Rams, obviously the offense is what it is. The offensive line is iffy, but the defense got a lot younger and a lot worse. So we'll see if the new additions can be good. But if you're going to catch the Rams, it's going to be week 2 at home and not week 17 away.
Yeah. Yeah, so I have them at 6 wins, so I have them actually hitting the under. One of our main differences is I have them going on a little 5-game losing streak here. I'm sorry, Cardinals fans, but the stretch of San Francisco, Green Bay, Chargers, who I think will be much improved,
Yes.
Miami, who is Miami, Chicago, who got you last year with Justin Fields and improved the team drastically. I think that's a really rough stretch. And to be honest, coming home to, I mean, you're still gonna be home against the Bears. I think that gives you an advantage, but, having that game against the Jets at home, I think is really gonna help. and then getting a win before the bye, before finishing out pretty strong. I have them going 3-4 in their last 7. So I think that's key. I don't think this team should have like Super Bowl aspirations or anything like that. But I do think that playoffs should be on their mind. And I think 8 wins could be enough in the NFC. I think probably 9. And NFC got a lot better this year. So I
Yeah.
think they're a little far away. But Randy, you probably have them fairly close to a playoff spot, like a couple
I
seeds
don't
away.
believe so. Just
Okay.
because I believe they're last in their division for me.
Okay.
Uh,
And it's really tough to make the playoffs when
yeah,
you're last in your division.
they're just below Seattle, so I doubt. I didn't actually separate it into playoffs yet, but
Yeah.
they
Yeah, we
would
haven't
they
gotten
would
there.
need some desperate stuff to get in there with how good the NFC is. Obviously, the AFC's got the quarterback darlings, which makes them better. But man,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
NFC is going to be a little bit of a bloodbath again this year. We'll see how this division's improved, so we'll see about it. But it
Yeah.
is fun to have us sandwiching the over under.
Yeah.
Not on purpose, but
Yeah, and we'll keep track of these. We'll let you know how we did next year when we do these. So, all right, we're gonna get over to my projections. And I do want to note that these are my projections. Please don't yell at Randy at all during this time. If you leave a comment, you can yell at me. But I went through and I've projected all 32 teams now, and I do have rankings. And we're gonna drop them. So I have Kyler Murray at QB 19. I have James Conner at RB 23. Trey Benson at RB 19. I have Trey Benson actually being the more fantasy viable running back. Marvin Harrison all the way up at wide receiver 14, and then their wide receiver 2 and Michael Wilson down at wide receiver 81, because I do think that Trey McBride has a pretty massive year still and ranks tight end 4. So, Randy, just your thoughts on this. Do you think that a second wide receiver kind of takes away some more stuff from Harrison and McBride, or do you think this is kind of close?
yeah, I would be curious. Did you look back at like the Hopkins years to see how many targets he got with Kyler?
I did. So really it's tough because the first couple of years it was like Hopkins was up in like the 26-27% range in target share. And it's also tough because this offense is going to throw the ball a lot less probably than what Cliff Kingsbury did. But so I went by share, and really I gave Marvin Harrison Jr. that's a 24% target share, which
Okay, that's fair.
it feels a little high for a rookie, but when you start to look at some other like high profile rookies like Marvin Harrison Jr. was, that's kind of right around, like Jamar Chase was right around there. Guys like that tend to get in that like 22 to 25 range. So I
Yeah.
went up
Well,
maybe a
then
little aggressive on that.
yeah, and then wide receiver 14, I'm happy with as someone that would draft Marvin Harrison in any rookie draft I could.
Yeah,
And then
fair.
Trey McBride, literally, basically what we said, a little bit more efficient, more touchdowns between him and Marvin
Mhm.
Harrison. You got 18 of Kyler's 23 passing touchdowns. I'm sure there's a couple more on the ground. But
Mhm.
I mean, that's that is an overwhelming majority. Got to be close to 75, 80% there. Uh,
Mhm.
and so that's 2 I see to Trey Benson, 1 to Michael Wilson. We only got 2 more touchdowns floating in the air, folks. Like
Mhm.
that's kind of what this is. And it really, that's, I'm assuming, the biggest thing for you, giving them 14 touchdowns just from the top 2 backs on the ground without even putting in Kyler's. That's kind of putting him down a little bit. I think
Yes.
the first thing people will see is a quarterback 19 until they get to Marvin, and they'll be like, oh, okay, that's fine,
Right.
for 14 there. So
I mean,
that's really like the takeaways from the offense. But yeah, I think McBride, like you have him here, I think he's pretty safely a top 10 tight end this year. Marvin, I think he's safely wide receiver 2 this year. The biggest thing also just the running backs, the split share here, pretty even. I'm assuming this is early, late, just knowing how
mhm.
you usually do these things. And
Yeah.
yeah, I do think Benson is a better pass catcher. Connor was relatively healthy the last 2 years, but he has had a pretty good injury history. So Benson's here for a reason. He's going to
Mhm.
start the takeover this year.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, I think there's a world in which they do throw in a few more touchdowns, but this offense like to run the ball, and I think that that continues with the high selection of Benson, and I do have Kyler getting in on the ground. I will say my main takeaway after I did these was that I think I'm going to be fading Kyler Murray in fantasy drafts this year because while I do think that his weapons can be good, I just think there might be some overdrafting of Kyler based on what he was. And, just I think the youth infusing the quarterback position right now. I mean, there's a ton of guys that you can justify taking over Kyler. So, no offense, Cardinals fans. I think this team is on the right track. I think they're going to be pretty good. But to me, they're just a little bit further away than what they need to be at this point. But like I said, on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people is going to really look at Kyler. It's looking, just pull it up, Fantasy Pros quick. Everyone's got him about 7 to 10 or 7 to 12. So I think you'll be among the lowest, especially if you're still on their rankings, which I believe you are.
So I don't know anymore, but
you won't be dragging down Kyler's fantasy value for 2024.
Yeah, that's right. Before we go, I do want to mention the Patreon, patreon.com/DevRoyale. If you feel like going over there, it's $5 a month. You can support us. You get a big Devy draft guide. I'm dropping these projections this week, so you can have my full set of projections. And there's a ton more stuff going out there. We've got full access to our Substack. There's just a lot going on over at the Patreon. So if you're wanting to support us over here, it's patreon.com/DevRoyale. Cardinals fans, make sure you let us know what you think of this preview. Where did we get things wrong? What did you think of our analysis of your team? We'd love to chat with you in the comments. So, like I said, this is a series we're hoping to do all 32 teams if it goes well. So, if you thought this was cool, share it with a friend. And we'll talk to you guys next time. Thank you guys for watching.